It was one of those nights when the house felt too quiet, almost suffocating in its stillness. I reached for Daniel's phone, only to check the time. Nothing more. But before the screen dimmed, a notification popped up. Bright, bold, impossible to ignore. The name on it was strange, disguised, as if he'd tried to hide it in plain sight. My stomach tightened. Something in me already knew this wasn't innocent. I tapped, hesitating for just a second, and the words appeared. Words that shattered the air around me. "Don't worry, baby. I'll tell her soon. We'll be together. Just give me time." My breath caught. Those sentences, so casual, so confident, pierced me deeper than any argument ever could. My chest tightened, my hands shook, but strangely, my mind turned sharp, almost frozen in clarity. I couldn't stop myself. My finger kept scrolling, and each message was another dagger. Promises of leaving me, sweet declarations meant for her, plans for a future that excluded me entirely. It wasn't a mistake, not some fleeting temptation. This was a double life carefully written over months. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. I'd been living inside his lie, the only one who didn't know the story. I sat there in the dim light, phone heavy in my hand, as if it carried the weight of every lie he'd ever told me. My first instinct was to march into the bedroom, to throw the phone in his face and demand answers. But the thought of his rehearsed excuses, his practiced charm, made me pause. No. He would twist it, make me question myself, and I refused to give him that satisfaction. Instead, I just stared at his words, reading them again and again, as if repetition would somehow dull the sting. Any day now. That's what he told her. Any day now, he'd leave me, discard our years together like old furniture. I thought of the dinners I cooked, the laundry I folded, the small kindnesses I offered that went unnoticed. How many of those nights had he been slipping away, building a life with someone else in his head? I felt the betrayal burn, hot and merciless. But under the fire, something else stirred, something steadier. I didn't want to cry, at least not yet. I wanted to think. I wanted to calculate. Because if he had a plan, so would I. And while he was busy imagining a future without me, I was already imagining a way to end his performance, in my own time, on my own terms. I slipped the phone back exactly where I'd found it, careful not to leave a trace. My heart was pounding, but on the outside I stayed calm, almost eerily so. When I looked at Daniel sleeping, sprawled out with the same careless ease he carried through life, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just a wife betrayed. I was a woman waking up, and I suddenly knew I couldn't let him see me break. In the quiet of that night, I began replaying our years together like a film. Every trip, every late-night meeting, every excuse that never quite made sense. They all clicked into place like puzzle pieces I hadn't realized were there. I wasn't blind, I had simply trusted too much. And now, with every message burned into my mind, I understood the truth. His story had never included me beyond convenience. I turned off the light and slid under the covers, facing the opposite side of the bed. My body lay still, but my mind refused to rest. Plans began to take shape, fragile at first, then stronger, sharper. He thought he had time, that he controlled the story. But he had no idea that I was already drafting the ending. The next morning, I smiled as if nothing had changed. I poured Daniel's coffee, kissed his cheek, and asked about his schedule, just like I always did. On the surface, I was the same wife he thought he knew. Inside, though, I was something entirely different, a performer stepping into a role. He believed he was clever, slipping his lies into late-night texts. But I had already learned my lines, and I was determined to play my part to perfection. Every laugh I gave him was measured. Every touch was calculated. He told me a story about a client at work, and I leaned in, nodding. making him feel adored. And while he rambled on, I was already planning my next move. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and carefully screenshotted every message I had found. Each promise, each secret word, preserved forever. Proof. My proof. When I was done, I emailed them to myself under a subject line so ordinary he'd never think twice if he stumbled upon it. A little insurance policy, tucked away in the quiet corners of the digital world. I looked at my reflection in the mirror before walking out, forcing myself to soften my eyes, to smile just enough. Because for now, he needed to believe I was still blind. And, oh, how easily he did. As the days passed, I became an actress in my own home. I laughed at his jokes, asked about his meetings, even reached for his hand across the couch. To him, nothing had changed. To me, everything had. Each moment felt like walking on a tightrope, balancing between fury and control. But I knew the performance mattered. The calmer I appeared, the more careless he became. In secret, I found myself sitting across from a lawyer, my hands steady as I slid the screenshots across the desk. She looked at me, not with pity, but with recognition. She'd seen women like me before, women who smiled on the outside while their world cracked beneath the surface. Together, we began mapping out the steps. The papers, the accounts, the quiet unraveling of a marriage. It felt cold, but necessary. Back at home, I carried on as if my day had been ordinary. Daniel sat at the table scrolling on his phone, and I set dinner down with practiced ease. He looked up, smiling, so sure of his secret. But what he didn't realize was that his lies were already numbered. Each bite of food I served him carried with it the silent knowledge that I was 3 steps ahead. And that was enough to keep me steady. At night, I would lie beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing as he drifted off without a care. My mind, though, was restless, running through strategies, rehearsing the moment I'd turn his world upside down. I thought about the years I'd given him, the trust I'd handed over so freely, and how easily he had gambled it away for someone else's attention. That thought didn't crush me. It fueled me. Sometimes I caught him smiling at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. That smug little grin he couldn't hide told me everything. He believed he was untouchable, that his secret life was perfectly stitched together. But every grin of his was another reminder that I held the threads now, and I was ready to pull until it all unraveled. And so, I played the doting wife. I kissed him goodnight, whispered sweet dreams, and tucked away my rage behind a soft smile. He had no idea the ground beneath him was shifting, inch by inch, with every step I took. Soon, the mask would come off, but not yet. Not until the stage was set exactly how I wanted it. One evening, as Daniel bragged about some minor victory at work, I leaned in and told him I wanted to celebrate him. His ego lit up instantly, just as I knew it would. I explained that I was planning a dinner, a gathering of family, friends, colleagues, people who believed in his success. The words tasted sweet coming out of my mouth because only I knew the truth. This wasn't a celebration. It was preparation. His chest puffed with pride as he nodded, pretending to be humble but unable to hide his excitement. He thought the night would be about him, another stage to flaunt his charm and soak up applause. Watching him agree so easily, so distracted by his own arrogance, was almost amusing. He never once questioned my sudden enthusiasm. Why would he? In his mind, I was still the same naive wife he could control. What he didn't see was me, late at night, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, scribbling guest lists with a steady hand. His parents, his colleagues, mutual friends, they would all be there. Everyone whose respect he valued most. I wasn't inviting them to honor him. I was inviting them to witness him, to see him stripped bare in the one arena where he couldn't spin his lies. In the following days, I carefully laid the groundwork, Between polite phone calls and cheerful invitations, I built the guest list with precision. His parents were delighted at the idea, his colleagues intrigued, and our friends eager to join. They all believed it was my way of honoring Daniel's hard work. And in a way it was, but not in the way they imagined. Every yes I received was another nail in the coffin of his carefully crafted image. At night, while he scrolled through his phone, texting her under that ridiculous alias, I sat at the computer designing a slideshow. He thought it would be about his career, snapshots of milestones and achievements. What it would truly reveal were his late-night promises, his cheap declarations of love, his pathetic rehearsals of a future without me. Each screenshot slid into place with a click, until the entire truth formed a story too undeniable to twist. I rehearsed my words silently, almost like a prayer. There would be no screaming, no dramatic outbursts, just calm, measured exposure. He had built a stage for his lies, and I would let him stand on it, only to have the spotlight show everyone who he really was. The beauty of it all was that he would walk right into it, smiling, without the faintest idea of what awaited him. The night before the dinner, I walked through the dining room in silence, picturing the scene as if it were already unfolding. The clink of glasses, the hum of conversation, the proud look on Daniel's face. I could almost hear his laugh, loud and rehearsed, filling the air. And then, I imagined the hush. The sharp, undeniable silence when the screen lit up with his words. That vision alone steadied me more than anything else could. I double-checked every detail. The slideshow file was tucked safely into my laptop, a copy backed up on a flash drive hidden in my purse. The guest list was confirmed. The seating arrangement ensured that his parents and colleagues would have the clearest view. Nothing was left to chance. Because if there was one thing I knew about Daniel, it was that he thrived in chaos. I wouldn't give him that advantage. When I finally slipped into bed, he reached for me, murmuring something about how lucky he was. I smiled in the dark, a smile he couldn't see. Because yes, he was lucky. Lucky that I hadn't ended this already. Lucky that I was patient enough to let him enjoy one last night of ignorant peace before the curtain rose. The dinner began just as I had envisioned. Warm lighting, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of polite laughter weaving through the room. Daniel sat at the center of it all, soaking up every word of praise, his smile wide, his voice carrying just a little too loudly. He thrived on attention, and tonight he had plenty. No one suspected that the evening was more than a celebration. No one but me. I moved gracefully among the guests, pouring wine, exchanging hugs, playing the role of the devoted wife. Every detail was in place. The food perfectly plated, the music soft in the background, the projector set and waiting. My heart beat fast, not from fear, but from anticipation. The moment I'd been rehearsing in my mind was finally within reach. And Daniel, too smug to notice, was walking straight into it. As dessert was served, I took a slow breath and let my smile linger. Then I rose from my chair, the room quieting as eyes turned toward me. My hands didn't shake. My voice was steady. "Tonight," I began, "I wanted to honor Daniel. He's been making some very big promises about his future." I saw him beam, completely unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. I clicked the remote, and the projector hummed to life. At first, a few heads tilted, expecting photos of Daniel at company events or snapshots of vacations. Instead, a message filled the screen in stark white letters on black. "Don't worry, baby. I'll tell her soon. We'll be together. Just give me time." The words hung in the air heavier than any toast could. The room shifted instantly. Gasps, silence, eyes darting between me and him. Daniel's face drained of color. He laughed nervously, mumbling something about a joke or a mix-up. But before he could spin his story, the next slide appeared. Another promise. Another declaration. Then another. Each one sharper, uglier than the last. Conversations that weren't meant for anyone else's eyes now filled the room, undeniable and permanent. I kept my gaze on him, not the screen, watching the panic bloom in his eyes. His parents stared in disbelief, colleagues stiffened in their seats, friends shifted uncomfortably. He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out this time. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I felt a surge of control so strong it nearly brought me to tears. I let the final slide linger a moment longer. A photo of the hotel receipt, time-stamped, undeniable. Then I walked to the table, set a folder down in front of Daniel, and looked him straight in the eye. "Congratulations," I said softly, my voice carrying through the silence. "Tonight you finally get to keep your promise. You're free, just like you said you would be." He fumbled with the papers, his hands shaking, the divorce documents plain as day for everyone to see. His parents' faces collapsed in disappointment, colleagues avoided his eyes, and the room's warmth turned cold in an instant. For once, his charm, his arrogance, his rehearsed words couldn't save him. The mask he'd worn so carefully had been ripped away, and all that remained was a man exposed in front of everyone who mattered. I sat back down slowly, folding my hands in my lap, the weight of the moment settling over me like a calm breeze. There was no need to raise my voice, no need for tears or theatrics. I had already won. He just didn't realize yet how completely his life had unraveled in a single evening, and how far the fall would still take him. The aftermath began before the night was even over. Daniel tried to pull me aside, his voice a harsh whisper, but no one in that room could unsee what they'd seen. His colleagues avoided him like a shadow, his parents sat frozen in their seats, and I watched the pride that once filled him shrink into humiliation. Every ounce of control he thought he had slipped right through his fingers in the span of minutes. The next morning, the silence in our home was deafening. He paced, stammered, begged, tried to explain. But I didn't need explanations anymore. I had evidence, I had papers, and most importantly, I had clarity. His words no longer mattered to me. They were just echoes of promises I knew he could never keep. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped by them. I felt free of them. I filed for divorce that same week. Walking into the lawyer's office, I felt my spine straighten in a way it hadn't in years. No hesitation, no second guessing, no fear of what came next. Just a quiet, unwavering strength. The life he thought he controlled was over, and mine, the one he had underestimated, was just beginning. Word spread quickly. His colleagues whispered behind closed doors, clients pulled back, and his carefully polished reputation began to crumble. Without me by his side, he looked smaller, weaker, just another man exposed for what he truly was. His parents barely spoke to him, their disappointment cutting deeper than any scolding ever could. And the mistress, the one he'd built his fantasy around, was nowhere to be found when the walls closed in. I didn't gloat, at least not out loud. There was no need. The satisfaction came quietly, in small waves, every time I saw the consequences settle on his shoulders. I didn't have to destroy him. His own words had done that for me. All I had done was shine the light, and the truth took care of the rest. Watching him unravel was almost poetic, the kind of justice no courtroom could deliver. Meanwhile, I felt lighter. I filled my days with simple things: a morning walk, a coffee I brewed just for myself, calls with friends I'd neglected during the chaos of our marriage. Every small routine felt like an act of reclaiming something I'd lost. He had stolen my trust, but not my spirit. And step by step, I was learning how to stand in my own freedom again. One evening, I stood on the balcony with a glass of wine in hand, the sky painted in shades of gold and crimson. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the table behind me, his name flashing again and again. begging, pleading, bargaining. I didn't even bother to silence it. The sound had become nothing more than background noise, a reminder of a chapter already closed. The breeze carried with it a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I watched the sun dip lower, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to break, for another secret to surface. I wasn't bracing myself anymore. I was living, finally, on my own terms. And the silence between his calls was sweeter than any apology he could ever offer. I lifted my glass and smiled to myself, a quiet, satisfied smile. He said he'd leave me soon, I thought, letting the words roll in my mind. I just made sure soon came sooner than he expected.